Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we're pleased to have as our guest, John Jackson from BYTAGIG. John, welcome.
Thank you, Skip. Pleasure to be with you. Been looking forward to this for a while.
Awesome. Well, would love for you to take a few minutes to kind of walk us through your professional journey. How did you end up at the current company and what got you started?
Yeah, so I was interested in technology and computers throughout high school, early 2000s, if that gives you any brief glimpse into how long I've been doing this. And really just fascinated me, seeing computers even back in the 90s. And if anybody remembers the term e-machine, I'm probably really dating myself now. I think that was one of the first computers we ever bought. So just always interested in them, how they worked from a very basic perspective. And then it just grew from there as I went into college, trying to figure out what I wanted to be in life. And I really enjoyed the business aspect of things in college. I thought, hey, business school will, teach me a lot of things that'll be valuable in life. And then not really interested in computer science. So that might be a little bit of a deviation from what some of your other guests probably the path they usually take. I went through coding, but I did not enjoy software and programming that much. So Portland State has, or had at the time, a management information systems degree through the School of Business. So essentially, business degree background, knowing how to manage technology and outcomes and deliverables to match the business. So went through that program, was great, helped open a lot of doors for me. Went through some internships at some local companies like ADEC out in Newburgh and a company called Ueco at the time. It's now part of the Parker Meggitt family, and learned a lot of great things. After that, I went to work for an electrical distributor based out of Seattle that had a location near my house in Oregon, and learned a lot about the real world. All the things that school taught me was still nothing compared to learning the real world and working with people and all of the things that you can't learn out of a textbook. So worked for them for a while, for about 12 years as a technical program manager. And during that time, I also had spun up my own side computer repair, computer consulting, whatever you want to call it, side hustle, and worked with people occasionally to help them with their computers, whether it be grandma who's, downloading Mahjong and infecting her computer once again, or some local plumbing company that didn't have anybody else they could call. So those were kind of my first experiences as an entrepreneur. And I eventually became bored, I guess you could call it, with my main day job and began to explore how can I make this side hustle into something that I can do on my own and create a steady stream of income. So in just talking to different people and getting some advice, I went through the process of becoming an MSP. So managed service provider, that essentially the MSP model, for those who don't know in your audience, it's essentially taking the concept of having a monthly contract, if you will, with a company who is dedicated to handling all of your technology issues and being that resource for help desk, network management, cloud server management, all of that. And I took that leap at the end of 2018, going into that, and then started to hire and grow even through COVID. We actually had a lot of customers who were starting to move everything to the cloud because of COVID and needed, new equipment, new systems. And also cybersecurity was starting to really become more of a focus during 2020, 2021. And even now, it's still a growing issue. So we really leaned hard into how do we become, that resource for businesses who don't have their own IT department, who don't have cybersecurity in-house, to help them build and strengthen their defenses of their network. We're not talking about going after the hackers and tracking them down and all that, but how do we just make it so hard that they cannot get in? So that's really where we started to take off, is in the 2020, 2021 space, and really started to grow our team. We now have about 10 employees on our team, and we have two locations now, physical locations, one in Portland and one in Boise, where I'm at the moment. And we are, continuing to serve clients nationwide. So, clients that are, again, too small to have their own internal IT staff, clients that really love and appreciate good technology that works well, and is secure and is well defended.
Excellent. And are there certain types of businesses that you work with apart from their size, like in certain verticals or, let's say retail or professional services, or is it really all over the place?
Pretty well all over the place, even though I'd say we generally do not have very many retail customers. We do have quite a few professional services, consulting firms, legal firms, financial professional services, a lot in that category.
And in terms of the areas that you offer in the way of services, are there certain ones that you see as particularly in high demand in recent years among your client base? Like, what are the ones that are pretty hot right now?
Yeah, areas of services, I would say generally there's a lot of customers who need help with cloud adoption and are somewhere along that journey, right? And and so we've helped a lot of customers, migrate all of their infrastructure to the cloud, meaning they don't have servers on site anymore that need to be replaced every so often, or they go down, right? The power goes out, the server goes out, or the internet goes out, the server goes out. Nobody can access it, whether they're from home or in the office. Once you move to the cloud, you don't have those issues anymore. And you don't have to worry about replacement, or somebody accidentally bumped the server and kicked it, or the broom handle fell over in the closet again. So that's where we find. Oh, you think I'm joking? It's
No,
legit.
I
Um,
know. Sadly.
um, and so you'd be surprised. There's still a lot of clients who are still in that, and somewhere along that journey, right, where they know that there's better options out there, but they have invested in their infrastructure, and it's, sometimes you're waiting for the life cycle of that infrastructure to kind of just die out before you move them to the cloud, because they maybe a year or two ago they just invested in all these server equipment and things like that. So, and don't get me wrong too, there are some legit reasons why some people still need a server on site, but I would say 90% of those reasons have gone away. A lot of
Mhm.
people are, for example, if you talk about a healthcare practice, a lot of healthcare electronic health record systems now are all in the browser, which brings me to another tangent, but I'll save that for a second. But it does eliminate that need for an on-site server for a lot of these EHR solutions, right? And so you start to see a lot of doctors' offices, small healthcare clinics, places like that, who don't need a server anymore.
Mhm. Yep. So let's revisit the health records in the browser scenario. What were you
Yeah.
gonna comment on there?
Yeah. So I get this a lot, and this is just one of these common myths I love to bust anytime I can. But when people say, "Hey, we're secure because all our EHR is in the cloud and we just use it through the browser," it couldn't be further from the truth. Can it be secured? Absolutely. But the common fallacy is that whatever browser I'm using is going to instantly secure that transfer of information between my computer and wherever that EHR is hosted. And and so what a lot of people don't understand is that they think they need no cybersecurity. That's where I love to educate and help people understand. Like, you still need cybersecurity, because any device that has access to that information could be used and taken control over without anybody even knowing it. There could be things that are, keyloggers, or screen capture systems and things like that, that could be viewing that same information that somebody is viewing on that computer through the browser. And so that's where we strongly still encourage having strong browser security. This is becoming more and more important, because why? Because whatever the browser has access to, a hacker could have access to still. That's why we also strongly encourage that people not save their passwords in the browser.
Mhm.
Uh, there's tons of tools out there that can easily scan and skim for those passwords on that computer and retrieve them. So We use and recommend password managers that are not built in the browser, but can be used as a browser plugin. For example, like 1Password or Dashlane or Bitwarden or something like that. So that's just one example. The browser is a consumer software. There's a few out there that are coming out that are calling themselves enterprise versions of browsers. I have yet to see how well they work in doing what they say they do, but yeah, it's a real concern that we still run into this a lot. We're like, hey, we don't need to worry about cybersecurity because we're not saving files on the server. Well, you're still viewing them. There's still information being transmitted.
And in terms of other recommendations along those lines to kind of move away from passwords altogether, I mean, what are your thoughts on sort of certain biometric or multi-factor authentication avenues
Right.
that are increasingly available?
Yeah, I mean, and again, 1Password has a lot of this, right? Where they
Mhm.
actually have what's called a passkey that you can build into 1Password for each site. So anytime you can use things like passkeys, biometrics, multi-factor authentication, absolutely a must-have. But if you think that your browser is going to, keep all that secure, you need to keep it separate. And that's just the common thing I like to encourage there because MFA, a lot of people are used to that now, accustomed to that, especially with EHRs. I'm pretty sure most EHRs require that by de facto. And most email systems, if they're not already, they should be. So it's more of a matter of like how do you make sure that you make it easy, right? And that's where a password manager helps with that because if you don't make it easy, people are going to be writing things down on a piece of paper. They're going to be saving it under their keyboard, post-it note on the monitor, text file on the desktop. We've seen it all. So that's where 1Password it just makes it so much easier. All you have to remember is 1Password, log into it, and it'll populate those passwords. It'll generate secure ones for you and save it there. And that way you can access it across multiple devices, your mobile phone, your desktop, your laptop, etc.
Excellent advice. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about AI. What are you seeing in terms of AI literacy and or readiness on the part of some of the businesses that you're working with?
Mm. What I'm seeing is that a lot of businesses are still a bit cautious when it comes to AI adoption, and for good reason. But I think the caution comes more from a matter of ignorance is the wrong term, but maybe it's just unawareness. So, unaware that AI can do a lot of things that help their business, or unaware in the fact that their employees and their team may already be using AI and they don't even know it. So that's what we found a lot is like there's some lack of awareness. So that's one is a couple of things that we like to talk about here. So one is that you have to be accepting of the fact that your employees are probably already using this to some extent. Two, you have to be aware that there's good ways to use AI and there's bad ways to use AI. And you need to be aware of what it can do to help your business as well, the benefits of it. So, my common best practice here is to say, hey, AI is most likely not going to replace anybody's jobs anytime soon, but can it help enhance those who are working and and use it in their everyday life? Absolutely. But how do we secure that information again? If people are inputting things into ChatGPT, Copilot, etc., all these different AI tools, and you as an employer or a manager or leadership, whatever, you don't even know it's happening. How can you be certain that that information is being stored securely or being put in an insecure environment? So one thing about AI that you have to know is that a lot of these AI tools by default will train on your data, meaning they could be taking things that could be considered intellectual property or things that are confidential information. And it could be used for training that anybody could have access to that training data through some format. So, anybody using the free version of ChatGPT, they're not paying the subscription or whatever. By de facto, you are helping train ChatGPT. Your data is being trained on. So, Okay, well, if that's the case, how do we govern our employees and how they use AI? Well, for one, they shouldn't be using the free version. So you're probably going to have to supply them with a subscription. Two, you're probably still, even if they're not training on your data, there's still a lot of things going on. We're still in kind of the wild west here when it comes to AI. So do I fully trust ChatGPT with all of my private confidential information? Probably not. I'm going to lean on the side of caution there. And I think there's a couple of good reasons why. I think in their first year they got hacked. And then just recently there was a big lawsuit with the New York Times who said, hey, you should be able to retrieve all of your deleted users' conversations. So somebody has a conversation with ChatGPT, they delete it. New York Times in a lawsuit had some sort of court order that said this is still discoverable because New York Times was trying to sue them for confidential information that they had. I should say not confidential, proprietary information that they had copyrighted that the ChatGPT was ripping off of them, supposedly in the lawsuit, right? I don't know how well you followed all that, but
Yeah.
I and so Skip, tell me if I'm off course here, but they had at one point in time they said this is all discoverable. You should still be able to see all these deleted queries from these users. And I think there was some recent reversal of some of that stuff, but it still could have been easily revealed. So why would I want to have all this private confidential information in a place where some court might just turn it over again and say all this is discoverable and all this confidential information could be revealed to the public, whether
Yep.
by hacker or by court or who knows what else. Internal leak at ChatGPT, OpenAI. So I say all that to say I don't fully trust all these systems yet, and I don't think anybody else should either.
Mhm. So that's good
So
advice. Yeah, like kind of err on the side of caution and be a skeptic, right? So what are some of the things that you recommend folks do in kind of like a, I don't know, checklist fashion, or what are the top three things?
right, so that's where again as I was kind of getting into before I went off on that diatribe, but the
Diatribes welcome on Techlandia. We have
there we
plenty of
go,
them.
good. So having policies in place that encourage employees to use AI responsibly, right? Don't upload, customer lists to OpenAI. Don't upload intellectual property, anything else that's confidential. Like, for heaven's sake, please don't upload, personnel files or things like that.
Trade
And
secrets.
so, yeah,
Right.
um, because like, and the thing is, going back for a second, Skip, if OpenAI and Claude and all these other AI companies have gone out there and they have, taken it's proven fact that they have taken copyrighted information and put it into their system to train on. So there's kind of some borderline ethical issues here. And why should we trust them? All right. So
Mhm.
I think they're going to have to earn our trust, and I don't think that's happened yet.
Yep. Yep.
um, so I think if I was to say, hey, like I should be careful about things like, and it's not to say that again, going back to like the checklist or whatever, telling employees like, hey, just anonymize things. If you want to have a customer list where you're analyzing like sales or something like that, so we generate a report, just call them customer one through 100 or whatever,
Mhm.
or customer A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can get a lot done still with anonymized information. It's just people are lazy, and that's what these tools attract to all of us is like it's going to save us time and money, sure, but let's do it right. So the anonymize information or make sure you're on paid versions of things that don't. And still, you need to check. You need to do your due diligence on any tool you use like this. Are they training on your data? What happens if this information is leaked? Well, okay, that's going to impact how I use the tool. So, and then also it comes down to the basics, like just like anything else, Skip. So, whether it's an EHR, it's a ChatGPT account or whatever, your account security is is where it's all at. Even people let's say, well, like Copilot's secure because my it's all linked to my Microsoft account. Well, okay, is your Microsoft account secure? How do you know?
Yep.
You use MFA, but I mean, there's ways around that too. People can do what's called session token theft, and there's ways to mitigate that. But what my point is that working with a trusted partner such as us, we're not the only ones out there, but there's working with trusted partners say, hey, how can we make sure our account access is secure so that wherever we have accounts, that we have responsible controls put in place so that people aren't using weak passwords, weak authentication methods, and especially in the term of AI, if a hacker was able to get in to a Copilot environment, they could find information so much more quickly than if that user didn't have Copilot. You can have, tons of data inside of SharePoint, and it would take a hacker a while to go find those SharePoint files that might be damaging to the company if they were breached, right? But if a hacker had Copilot access and they could just start querying things, I guarantee you they're going to find much quicker. So that's the other piece too to this is like if you're using something like Copilot, you need to make sure and understand who has access to what files because whatever that user is that has that Copilot license can also access whatever their user permissions are within OneDrive, SharePoint, etc. Means they can also access those files with SharePoint or with Copilot.
Yep. So it's kind of like a similar approach as was recommended in the aftermath of the Target breach a while back, which underscored that a lot of companies weren't thinking about their cybersecurity strategy in sort of concentric circles. You're like, what are the things that you need to have really locked down, your crown jewels? And then you've got, gradually more permissive sort of permissions and restrictions as you get farther out, right? From
Mm-hmm.
sort of the core most valuable thing. So would you recommend a similar approach here as companies are thinking about, well, I can't necessarily lock down everything, but are there things that you do need to spend as much time as possible making sure that everyone has clear marching orders, clear permissions defined, et cetera? Does that make sense, or do you recommend a different approach?
Yeah, that's very similar, right? Like, so with the Target breach, if you're talking about the one with the HVAC sensors,
Yep. Yep.
right? So what could have been a very simple, easy fix in that situation, that scenario, right? And the fact that for those who aren't aware, Target had a breach several years ago where all of their point of sale systems were hacked because they had sitting on the same exact flat network with everything else, their point of sale system and these IoT devices that were monitoring the HVAC systems. The IoT devices have to be connected to a network, right? They just threw them all on the same network. And we still see this a lot too, by the way. It's a great example of like where, people put their cameras on the same network and they bought these cameras cheap on eBay or Amazon or whatever. And they're straight from China and they're riddled with security vulnerabilities. Phones, people's mobile devices, they throw it all in the same pool and it just pollutes the pool and it's just asking for problems. So, that's why we strongly recommend network segmentation is for that very reason. But in
Okay.
the same regard, if you're talking about, let's say, for example, a SharePoint environment, well, you have built into that usually most companies have some sort of a folder structure where these types of people should have access to these folders, but these other people should not have access to them. So, for example, if it's HR related, only the HR people should have access to it. If it's payroll related, only the payroll people. But when you have a Copilot license assigned to that user, well, they have access to all that information, right? So you have to be careful about maybe sometimes maybe you need to go through and do an audit of who's in my SharePoint, just like what in the Target example, and say, all these devices need access to this network in the same way and they should have the same access to everything? Or should we start segmenting and segregating our network as well as our data? And that's where data classification comes in too. I just talked to an individual not too long ago who works for a public utility where they set up like an internal chat bot, right? Where you can query this chat bot and it basically searches throughout their SharePoint libraries to find the answer for you, which is pretty helpful, right? Like
Mhm.
what's the time off policy? What's the vacation policy? What's this policy? Which is great. But they had to go through, first of all, and they had to do a full audit of all their SharePoint libraries and documents to classify things that they didn't want that chatbot to go query, so that somebody couldn't say, "Hey, what's Skip's password?"
Right.
or what's Skip making it?
Right.
And or what are the common complaints about Skip and his personnel file? Like, those are the things you would not want this chatbot to query. But by turning it just by turning it on and flipping a switch, as oftentimes these tools are marketed or sold, that it's going to solve all your problems. But by turning that switch on, you might be giving it access to way more than you want.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I know those are all great pieces of advice. And if you were to ask my wife, what's Skip making, her answer is always the same: never enough. So as we think about, kind of winding down here or wrapping up, I always like to ask our guests, what are you reading? What are you listening to kind of keep on top of this rapidly changing environment?
Yeah, I mean, I like listening to all kinds of things on Audible. I'm listening to right now the AI Edge by Jeb Blount.
Hmm.
It's a good one. Also, totally non-tech related, but I always get tons of motivation out of listening to some of the Navy SEAL guys. And let's see here, what's
That really puts things in perspective. You think your day is hard.
yeah, exactly. David Goggins is one of the ones that really I
Oh,
think
yeah.
is just
Yep.
amazing. All the things he's accomplished and been through. Um, so yeah, I enjoy listening to those types of things. And when it comes to you know podcasts and things like that, also love the podcasts again by Jeb Blount and some of the other more business related podcasts, Grant Cardone, Brandon Dawson, some of those guys. And of course, we have our own podcast as well, the BYTAGIG podcast, which maybe we'll have to have you on sometime, Skip.
Yeah, sounds great. Love it. Happy to. Well, any final words of wisdom?
I think that the future of technology and obviously is getting heavily impacted by artificial intelligence, right?
Hmm.
Also, quantum computing is going to have a big impact on that as well. But just the continued, I guess, the continued advice that adoption with responsibility. There's great aspects of AI that can help businesses of any type, and that's what we're here for, right? Is helping businesses adopt AI and whatever new technology is coming out and adopt it responsibly, because it's not something you should necessarily be scared of, but you just need to know that there's of course, just like anything else, there needs to be a user guide and a manual and somebody that can help develop that and for your organization, and make sure that you have your team responsibly adopting whatever technology is currently out there and whatever's to come.
Well said. With that, it's a wrap. Thanks for joining us and taking some time to share some of your wisdom with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Skip. It's been a pleasure.
That's a wrap on this episode of Techlandia, the podcast, where innovation meets insight. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and share it with your fellow tech explorers. You can follow us at techoregon.org for updates and more tech-fueled content. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future.